I decided to ask your unplugged coworker some questions about history, not to preach to them, but to get an idea of where the most average person you know is at on, well, the world. I asked your coworker, what is the lesson of what happened in Germany? They sat in silence before shrugging and saying, don't hate Jewish people and be chill. Not wrong, but not the answer I was hoping for. Maybe I'm asking the wrong question. So I didn't ask if they think something like what happened in Germany could happen again today, and they said with confidence no. Here's where my intrigue grew. Naturally, I asked why. Their reply, we're above that. It'd be hard to get away with, and people will make a big deal. It took me asking why it wouldn't happen again to find a follow-up question that partially inspired this video. My final question to your coworker was, why? Why did this tragedy happen? Like, what led to it? They paused for a moment, and I could tell I really had them thinking before they anticlimactically say, I don't know. Poetry. Tragic poetry. Angels cry at the attempts of writers to capture the endless information a single statement conveys about the speaker and the state of our world. Did I inform your coworker of what they should actually take away from what happened in Germany? Do I? No. I make a video essay and pester them to watch it because sometimes things take uninterrupted time to explain. A video essay about the Black Scare, erasing history, and that hopefully provides a guide of red flags that we maybe should concern ourselves with. Outside of not everyone hates Jewish people, so we're good. The ultimate goal of this video is accessibility. I don't want it to be only digestible to the academic types. The future of Western civilization depends on your coworker watching this.
Girl, shut the fuck up. You thought you ate that?
So hopefully we can do this in under 20 minutes. Hopefully. I'm not much of a current event commentator anymore. The birth of Philosynoir came from desire to not do that. There's enough lefty political commentary channels, and I don't have the bandwidth to keep up with a Luke Beasley or Dan last name. They do fine commentary, but since they cover current events, they don't always do heavy analysis or spend much time on specific issues. This video is to give one such issue/event the careful analysis that I feel it deserves. That event is this recent executive order titled Returning Sanity and Truth to American Education. Saros TV, who isn't even much of a political content creator, made a video about how they're frustrated they're not seeing more videos about it or not seeing people make a fuss about it. And honestly, that was what pushed me to make this video because I felt similarly. Saros, if you're watching, this exists because of you. This video mainly relies on Jason Stanley's Erasing History. I read it recently and it's highly relevant to what we're discussing. But that's my intro. Let's get into the order, shall we? Section 1 states, once widely respected as a symbol of American excellence and a global icon of cultural achievement, the Smithsonian Institution has, in recent years, come under the influence of divisive, race-centered ideology, promoting narratives that portray American Western values as inherently harmful and oppressive. For example, the museum today features an exhibit representing that societies, including the US, have used race to establish and maintain systems of power, privilege, and disenfranchisement. The exhibit further claims that, quote, sculpture has been a powerful tool in promoting scientific racism and promotes the view that race is not a biological reality, but a social construct, stating that race is a human invention. The National Museum of African American History has proclaimed that hard work, individualism, and the nuclear family are aspects of, quote, white culture. The forthcoming Smithsonian American Women's History Museum plans on celebrating the exploits of male athletes participating in women's sports. These are just a few examples. We'll start with this hard work is white culture, since this is the one I've been seeing spread around the most. Is hard work part of white culture? Let's see what the hubbub is about. So they're referring to this infographic that says, quote, Protestant work ethic is an aspect of white culture, and they list examples of the Protestant work ethic mindset or beliefs. One being hard work is the key to success, work before play, and that failure is a result of not working hard enough. Hard work is the key to success is what they're talking about. But this contention is based on the belief that success relies on hard work isn't exactly false, but it's not fully true. In fact, a lot of the time it's not. You see, it ignores this pesky thing we call reality. Firstly, what is hard work? Does it mean the more I sweat, the more I'll succeed? In that term, what is success? Is it being rich? Is the argument that anyone can be rich with enough hard work? Then why aren't construction workers rich? If hard work equals success, then why do desk workers tend to get paid more? Is desk work harder than manual labor? I dare you to say that to a construction worker. We can also take this belief in hard work and a historical narrative. The hard work that led to the building of this nation imposed upon indigenous people that led to, well, a word that rhymes with pesticide. But we also know they had a different relationship to work and labor and land that was antithetical to the Americans. The statement also implies that the unsuccessful are lazy or not doing enough. Whoever the unsuccessful is, I guess. But all these hot takes require at least 5 minutes of thought, so we'll likely never see such insight on the page of the White House. What do you think? This is some proper country? Now let's talk about the erasure a bit. The order undeniably takes issue with this statement. Societies, including the United States, have used race to establish and maintain systems of power, privilege, and disenfranchisement. Is this not true? For any conservative watching, what are they getting at here? I don't even know what to, I don't need to fact check that segregation was a thing. This is just attacking black studies, which I have called the Black Scare. Something far from new. Robert Allen wrote in 1974, "The demand for black studies cannot be separated from the rise in militant black student movement in the 1960s. It is no exaggeration to say that the establishment of hundreds of black studies curricula in colleges and universities across the land was a major achievement of the black student movement. What was new about the 1960s was that, one, for the first time, masses of black students became involved in the struggle for educational change, and two, it widely recognized that not only were black students and teachers largely excluded from American higher education, but the totality of the black experience was not to be found in the curricula of the vast majority of colleges and universities. By widening educational democracy, black studies could pave the way for the introduction of new and revolutionary ideas into the curriculum, and this was correctly perceived as a threat by conservative administrators and faculty." This part. They know what's the threat. The regressives, which is my personal term for conservatives, know that education is threatening to their cause. They know telling the full story that doesn't position America as a savior of humanity reveals their past and current cruelty. And the US bans on teaching concepts such as critical race theory and structural racism serve to bolster fascist politics. With no understanding of structural racism, of the practices that maintain racial hierarchies, a white observer might struggle to see the intolerable conditions that drive political movements like the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. To such an observer, the protests may seem frightening, driven by unfounded anger, the result of a kind of mental instability, see my last video, and thus a dangerous movement that warrants a violent and characteristically fascist response. Now let's talk about the shit. This order openly implies that race is a biological reality. This is what we call race science. This is what we call wrong. If race is biological, then they have grounds to say who's really human. It gives them room to say that some people are just inferior, and that's why they're impoverished. That's why they're always angry. That's why no one will hire them. That's why we must remove them. It rationalizes their bigotry so they can say it's just science. These two implications are attempts to wash America's hands of past atrocities while justifying the present ones. They don't want you to teach that America wasn't the land of freedom for everyone. Its success was largely based on the opposite of such ideals. And to this I ask, what would they prefer the story be?
Are you for real? We can't live
Well,
without them. I knew I should
whatever
have loved you.
happens,
I
happens.
don't want to die.
Perhaps a story told by the South in the 1950s. The Virginia Textbook Commission in 1957 taught that life among Negroes in Virginia in slavery times was generally happy. Academic histories of the time, including school textbooks, blamed Black Americans themselves for the loss of these rights and privileges. In a textbook from the 1930s, the Reconstruction period is described as a time marred by Black political corruption and racist stereotypes dating back to the 19th century. U.S. textbooks taught that Black people are naturally inclined towards corruption and mismanagement, and thus not suited for participation in democratic life. But don't worry, things aren't like that now because we have PragerU, which is an approved educational institution in some states. Stanley mentions how this random commentator that had on once asserts that white people were the first to formally put an end to slavery. So sneaky. I don't think Stanley catches this plausible deniability they engage in here. You see, she says formally, which implies, bureaucracy or whatever. Spoken in this way, it's not technically wrong. Now, I say this because she goes on to cite Britain being the first to abolish slavery in its colonies, citing their Abolition Act, and then going on to cite the 13th Amendment. These are examples of formal abolition. But you know what's not formal? Rebellion. There's nothing formal about ending your enslavement by way of killing those who enslaved you. Owens neglects to mention Haiti, the first country to be born from a successful slave rebellion, which began in 1971. She seems ignorant of the fact that Haiti, not Britain, was the first country to abolish slavery. They're referring to the Haitian Revolution if you're unaware. But there's also some erasure Stanley points out as well. The statement white people ended slavery while citing the 13th Amendment ignores that not only white people fought in the Civil War or contributed to the schools of thought that led to abolition. There were white and black abolitionists who undeniably played a part in the 13th Amendment, undeniably played a part in the Civil War. A more accurate statement would be that some white people helped in slavery. Not the most informative statement, but much less propagandistic, at least. You'll likely never see PragerU making a video about how after abolition, many slave owners got reparations, while black Americans are still asking for 3 acres and a mule. Fuck you, Andrew Johnson. Chat, how long before the Department of Education is handed over to Dennis Prager? This entire executive order, the wording of it all, reeks of American supremacy and nationalism. While supremacist nationalisms have flourished all around the world, the US is home to an especially potent strain known as American exceptionalism, which represents the country's founding as innocent and its westward expansion as justified. To support these claims, the historical narrative of American exceptionalism erases both the central role that slavery played in shaping the country's economy and the vast word that rhymes with pesticide of indigenous people. This form is also linked to religion. According to it, America's greatness stems from both its whiteness and its Christianity. By contrast, however, Aryan nationalism, the form at the heart of German fascism, was a purely racial nationalism. For them, the biological race of the Germans and race alone was allegedly the source of German supremacy. So the commonality between American and German nationalism is that they both share this ideology of racial supremacy. And in both places, this ideology has been employed to justify mass violence against supposed racial others. It's not always racial though. Religion has played a central motivation for some others. See that place that if you talk badly about you may end up in a gulag or disappear. Rules for D but not for me. Protection for me but not for D is the most simplistic way of describing the vibes. These are reasons they give, right? This race is bad or this religion is bad or dangerous. But sometimes they'll just make up reasons why their opponents are being attacked by them without basis of religion or race. The leader of non-tariff land of big coats can be an example of this. As a Russian nationalist see it, Ukrainians belong to the same race and ethnicity as Russians and are hiding behind a quote fake Ukrainian identity. You can also argue that it's motivated by this type of red pill-esque ideology, which is my interpretation of another statement they gave to justify this war. Do we want to have here in our country parent number 1 and parent number 2 instead of mom and dad? What the fuck is this? Have they gone mad out there? To be drummed into them that there are various supposed genders? Oh god, what that has to do with the Ukrainian people, I have no fucking idea. But Stanley makes clear that not all nationalism is the same, in the sense that not all nationalism thrives on degrading others and asserting superiority. Nationalism can also be anti-colonial. Anti-colonial nationalism too comes in both universal and non-universal forms. While it may be tempting to assume that Enlightenment ideals such as universal moral personhood draw a clear line of distinction between supremacist and anti-colonial nationalisms, this is not the case. Enlightenment ideals can be used to support both kinds of nationalism. Universalism can be used to fight colonialism by appealing to the common humanity of indigenous groups facing colonization. Universalism has also been regularly misused in the colonist project to exclude populations from equal respect, for example, by deeming some populations savage and hence outside the boundaries of universal moral personhood. See my last video. When you suppress the knowledge of past atrocity, past rebellions, etc., Stanley says it leaves the impression that the status quo has never been and cannot be challenged. They ban books in schools because they're inappropriate or woke or gay or whatever. Tell them to take it to the public library, and then when that happens, they say they shouldn't be in a public library either. What you can have in schools, though, is this book about the Freedom Rebellion of January 6th, where King Trump saved our country from the trans-immigrant Soros-funded spy Joe Pence in a sword fight to the death. You're here to educate, not indoctrinate. We were told these books didn't belong in schools and should be in public libraries. Now they're saying those same books should be removed from the library. A clear attempt to deprive everyone of the ability to read them. Educational authoritarianism is accompanied by restricting general knowledge and replacing it with myth and representation, or as we said in the last video, spectacle. The bad guys controlled the publication and dissemination of books, banning anything they considered alien or decadent in Germany. In 1933, they carried out a massive book burning. The main contents of this book burning were the contents of the Institute for Sexual Science, which was at the time the most extensive research collection of queer theory in the world. This is why I'm concerned about the attack on the Smithsonian, which also has clear queerphobic intentions through its attacking of trans women. Like they hated the Institute of Sexual Science for its queer affirmation, so now the current administration hates the largest museum in the world, the Smithsonian, for providing queer affirmation. But that's no biggie, just crazy leftist talk. If water, does that make me a They not only targeted Jewish intellectuals who studied queer perspectives, but also sought to eliminate any suggestion that queer life was or could be normal. To do this, they would need to completely remake the country's education system by encouraging the public to draw a connection between overly permissive educational practices and what they saw as, quote, sexual perversion. All great strides make their start in education or are heavily strengthened by it. Education, knowledge, intellect is power. They know the value of education all too well. Start putting shit on flash drive, kids. They'll come for the video essays eventually. Stanley asserts that many of those targeting public education tend to conveniently push a religious education as a substitute. If you save me, Reddit, if you save me, Reddit, if you save me. This all swings in the direction of what's called a classical education. Stanley says this is a system of education that intentionally forms its canon from the paradigmic texts of ancient Greece and Rome. But classical education can be easily used as a tool to dehumanize, reinforce hierarchy, and support supremacy of the dominant group. In Kenya, for example, classical education has been used to justify crimes of colonialism. Another ideal of Enlightenment thought that can be misused to support systems of hierarchy is a concept of objectivity. It is impossible for humans to achieve objectivity in the quote view from nowhere sense. And yet, such ideal objectivity is central to many arguments of today's fascist movements, including their hostility towards schools and universities, which they see as having a far left bias. The ideal education in their account is neutrality, which for them means a far right bias. The veneration of classical tradition undergirds the, quote, civilizing mission of colonialism under the banner of religion and trade, liberalism, and capitalism. But returning to your coworker, the lesson from Germany is that we should be aware of the process that led to it, the steps taken, the red flags we've illustrated. The lesson is when we don't educate people of the past atrocities, we're unable to see them preparing to be repeated. The lesson is that anti-queer, anti-black, hyper-nationalist, supremacist education and policy is a key ingredient of tragedy. That education is crucial in prepping a society to ignore or confront tragedy. That's what I want your coworker to take away from this. Also, that they should look up the Madagascar plan and then check out how the deportations are going. No reason, just for funsies. But that's all I have for today. I highly recommend Stanley's book and my other videos. Subscribe or download this video before my channel becomes illegal. Also, let me know if this format of video is enjoyable. Is it coworker friendly? Or do you prefer my more dramatic, heavily researched videos? Yeah, see you whenever.